spare. Living with Willy. Now, for all the perverts there, this, of course, is a reference to his brother, you degenerates, and you ought not to be thinking about anything else, and if you are, shame on you. You need to go and find a mirror, look in it, and have a word with yourselves as to your perverted ways. Now, you also then you need to go and purchase Sex and the Narcissist, which you'll either find in the Knowledge Vault or on Amazon, and read that cover to cover to understand where you might fit into all of that with your pervy brain, and at the same time learn so much more about how the narcissist regards sex. Of course, we're continuing the analysis of Harry's autobiography, and at this juncture, following his ongoing training, he explains that he was living in Shropshire, and he was living there with William, who was also training to become a pilot. William had found a cottage not far from the base and invited Harry to stay with him, or Harry thinks perhaps he invited himself. He explained it was cosy and charming, just up a narrow country lane, and behind some thickly canopied trees. Again, the ghostwriter undoubtedly creating an image of what it was like there. If it were Harry, he'd have said, yeah, it was nice. Yeah, nice cottage. And that had been it. He explains the fridge was packed with meals that had been sent by his father's chefs. Life's hard, isn't it, huh? And that there were some stables. And therefore, he provides us, which I think is with perhaps one of the few parts that he's actually written himself, because it states, at the back of the house, there were beautiful stables, which explained the horse smell in every room. That generally is the case, Harry, that if there is an animal there, you'll be able to smell that animal smell. So it's a little bit like, why does this house smell of dog? Ah, that's because 2 dogs live here. Right. Why does this room smell of freshly laundered linen? Oh, that's because somebody's drying some over there on a maiden. That'll explain it then. Gosh, why is there a sudden smell of citrus fruits in this room? Oh, that's because somebody's burning a candle that's marked citrus fruits. Gosh, that's why. Amazing things smell, isn't it, Harry? Well done on working it out. He explained that they both enjoyed the arrangement of living together, and it was the first time they'd lived together since Eton. Moreover, and once again, mention of the press has to come about, he said that they were together for the decisive moment, the triumphal unravelling of Murdoch's media empire. After months of investigation, a gang of reporters and editors at Murdoch's trashiest newspaper were finally being identified, handcuffed, arrested, charged with harassment of politicians, celebrities, and the royal family. Corruption was being exposed, finally, and punishments were forthcoming. So accordingly, he's taking great delight in his personal bugbear, the press, having part of its members taken down. He explained that one of the individuals is a person that he calls Thumb, which is the journalist who'd done the absurd story about his thumb injury at Eton. He explained that he'd healed up, but Thumb had never mended his ways, and in fact he'd got a lot worse, and he'd become a boss with a whole team of thumbs at his command, under his thumb ? Ho! Harry cracks a gag, well done. And this was all about hacking into people's phones. And of course, he also explained that Rehabacooks, which of course is his acronym, anagram rather, for Rebecca Brooks, also known as Rebecca Wade, and she was married to Ross Kemp for a period of time. I'm not sure if she took his name or not. Anyway, she explained that she had resigned and then she was arrested by the police. He explained that he felt a tremendous amount of relief at all of this news, and he was pleased that so many of them would lose their jobs and their ill-gotten fortunes. He said that him and Willy were overjoyed about this, and that their circle of closest friends had been vindicated, or rather they'd been vindicated their closest friends, because he wanted them to know that they hadn't been paranoid about what had been going on. And he said that they'd been betrayed, as is suspected, not by bodyguards or best mates, but it was those Fleet Street weasels. Although I think Harry might be missing out the fact that invariably journalists manage to get this information because there's somebody close to the famous person who's willing to grass them up, dob them in, share the secrets. Money is quite a motivator. Two main motivators, fear and money, and sometimes one can combine them. He explained that the public was horrified at this outcome, because if journalists could use the mighty powers vested in them for evil, then democracy was in a sorry shape. Again, I really don't think this is the writing of Harry, and is most likely the desire that his wife has in terms of this sort of being rather sanctimonious, and the guest writer sort of knocking into shape their sentiments in this regard. And he talks about how journalists have been able to do what they want, and there were death rattles coming from the most popular Sunday newspaper, Murdoch's News of the World. And advertisers were talking about fleeing, and readers were talking about boycotts, and Harry wonders if that finally, the Murdoch's grotesque two-headed circus baby might finally expire. Again, such flowery language is not something that one would necessarily expect to come from Harry, and it's likely the ghostwriter has conveyed all of this, which of course again takes away from the fact that this is meant to be Harry's story, and what we're really getting is Harry's story has percolated through a ghostwriter to probably make it some way palatable, and of course heavy doses of Harry's wife's influence in it also. Harry then says that all of this put him and William in a good mood, but they didn't really talk about it explicitly. And he said they had loads of laughs in the cottage, talking about all kinds of different things, but not that. And when he says not that, he means the explicit aspect of dealing with the press. And he said maybe it was because it was too painful, or they didn't want to jinx it. Or he said possibly there was some surface tension, or rather some tension under the surface between him and William, which he wasn't fully comprehending, which I'm not really sure where that comes from. And he said that he and William did a rare joint interview, and he said that Willy griped about his habits and said that Harry's a slob and Harry snores. And then another attempt by Harry to have a whinge by saying, I looked at him and thought, are you joking? I cleaned up after myself and I didn't snore. And besides, our rooms were separated by thick walls. I mean, dear me, getting yourself so worked up about the fact that your brother says that you're a slob and that you snore. He's probably just having a joke with you, Harry, and you're having a sense of humour failure. He said the reporters found it all very funny, but he had to cut in, saying that it was all lies, and that just made them laugh harder than ever. But then he goes on to say, well, I laughed as well because it was banter, and we often did that, but now I can't help wonder if something else was at play. He writes, I was training to get to the front line, the same place Willy had been training to get, but the palace had scuttled his plans. The spare, sure, let him run around a battlefield like a chicken with its head cut off, if that's what he likes, but the heir, no. That doesn't even make sense, because he hadn't been allowed to go to the front. He'd been prevented. As soon as the press knew about him, he'd been given the huck. So it wasn't the case that he was allowed to go and do what he wants, so he contradicts himself. And also this suggestion there was something else at play when clearly there wasn't. He gets on well with his brother, but as I mentioned in earlier videos, this seems to me that this is once again today Harry questioning yesterday Harry and causing something to be there that wasn't there. Almost as if Harry's wife has said, you don't realise, Harry, but your brother's always taken the piss out of you. It's all right for him. He's the heir. You've been the spare. Everybody's worshipped him and they've laughed at you. They've all given him due respect and reverence, but they've thought that you're a clown. Although that could be, if you not thought though, that might be something to do with the fact that at times he is a clown. Not always. As we know, when he's allowed to get on with tasks which are of a practical nature, he seems to rather do well. But I can well imagine, as part of controlling him, that Harry's wife has said to him, as part of her control over him and driving a wedge between him and his brother, you haven't realised, Harry, they're always laughing at you behind your back. And, you know, they give William all this respect, and they let him do what he wants. But, they don't allow you because you're not as important. And you haven't seen it, but I can see it, Harry. I can see the fact that he's always putting you down and mocking you. And it's not just bants. He's doing it in order to make you feel small. You can hear her saying it, because that's exactly the type of triangulating and divisive behaviour that a narcissist would engage in. And of course, Harry for years has thought nothing of it. Why? Because there was nothing to think about. It was banter with his brother, and he got along very well. And then along came the spider, and once again poured poison in his ear, and started to make him believe that there was a problem in his relationship with his brother, when there actually wasn't. And the fact is that you can see how this has been altered by the arrival and inclusion of Harry's wife. It's very typical for a narcissist, as part of asserting control over that intimate partner, primary source, to be divisive vis-a-vis non-intimate secondary sources, i.e. family and friends, to make it easier to control that individual. And he, in the fog of his low cognitive function and emotional thinking, starts to think, you could be right, actually. He was always taking the mick out of me. See, I told you. He was always taking the mick out of you. And it was done to belittle you. Oh, I thought it was banter. Oh, it's not banter, Harry. And he's like, oh, okay, whatever you say, Megs. So a quite useful example of the influence of the narcissist, once again. After this, the rather interesting title of The Ninja. Join me in the next video.